either way, he's like the encyclopedia of mafia history, and I've sat down with him for cigars and drinks, and not only that, I've read all of his books. He really can tell you Ybor City was probably the best kept secret in mafia history.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with Max Herman, and Max runs Ybor City Ghost Tour. I recently went on the tour, and I thought it was super cool, so I asked him if he would be on the podcast. Jess and I went on it, and we'll get into it, and so check this out.
Matthew, thanks for having me, and It's a pleasure and coming on my tour and enjoying Ybor City along with me. It's really nice to be out here. You got a great setup. I mean, really, really well done. And I'm happy to see you again. I mean, how you been?
Yeah, good. So, I was gonna say, what I wanted to mention was that I've actually been on ghost tours before.
Okay.
So, and I think I mentioned that when we went on,
Yeah.
when I talked on the phone with you that time, was that so it, you know, I don't know, you probably don't know anything about you don't know much about my story anyway. When I was on the run for 3 years, but when I was on the run, I actually went to New Orleans at one time. We went for like me and the chick I was with, we went for like a week or two, and we went on 3 different ghost tours.
How about that?
And but they, you know, and they were cool and they were interesting, but we stayed outside like the houses. Like we stayed on the street, and they would walk and stand in front of this building was built in 1810 and was owned by so and so, and then in 1890 there was a murder, and they would do that. But yours was different. When I went on yours, so I always liked ghost tours.
Yeah.
But when I went on yours, we actually went into the houses, and it was way different. You went way deeper into the history of Ybor City, and so it was really cool. And I learned a lot on it, and that's why.
It's a major difference when you go on ghost tours or any kind of tour, whether it's history ghosts or art. Depending on who the guide is, makes the tour what it is. I mean, everything I give you can get out of a Google search, really, but I also present it in a certain way that brings you, like, it paints the picture for you as we lead into these haunted buildings. Now, as you know, because you went on the ghost tour, I pretty much tell the stories of what happened here, the history, and give you a good idea, and then I let you explore. Because if I'm in that building talking and trying to hit buttons or something the way some ghost tours can do, the ghosts will just disappear. No pun intended. But, like, they will literally come out and play if you walk into that building with the respect and knowledge of what has happened there. And if you do go in there with an open mind, I mean, more times than not, you'll get activity.
All right. Well, I was going to say, do you remember the safe where you showed us the safe?
Yeah.
A couple days after you and I, or you, me, and Jess, we went on the tour. A couple days later, it was Jess and I took her daughter, and we went and saw the safe. And I was like, how heavy this thing. Remember you were trying to get us to roll it around. You like push on it. Like it's
a classic old safe, and it's got so much history behind it. That's the other thing about the tours. We sprinkle in some history to make sure you understand why these old buildings are here. And then after that, we get right into the good stuff, the murder, the mayhem, the heartbreak, and, well, of course, the spirits.
Right. So Ybor City, a lot of people that watch this, like, you have to understand, there are people from Tampa, but then there are people from,
around the world.
L.A.
Yeah.
I get guys that are from Australia. Guys will send me stuff from, hey, New Zealand or wherever. Cool. They're like, hey, watching from the UK.
Hello, New Zealand.
So, basically, there's Tampa, and there's an area of Tampa called Ybor City. And tell me what the history of Ybor City.
So Ybor City, first of all, came together when Tampa was nothing but alligators and mosquitoes. The population of Tampa, Florida came together in 1885. It was about 700 total people. But this Spaniard named Mr. Vicente Martinez Ybor, he went to Cuba to avoid conscription to the army of the Civil War in Spain. When he got to Cuba, he learned about cigars. And in the cigar industry, he worked his way through. Eventually, he opened his own factory and became wildly successful. From there, he got to be pretty comfortable as a Cuban and a little bit more, upset with the Spanish colonization of Cuba. He started speaking out on it, so the Spanish government kicked him off the island. He went to look for a new place to go, and as he walked around America, or traveled around America, he started seeing industry towns popping up around. He knew that he could open a new factory anywhere, but he wanted his own industry town, which I know that sounds crazy today, but you think of places like Hershey, Pennsylvania and stuff, it was not uncommon. Well, he comes to Tampa, Florida. Like I said, backwater, nothing but fishing cottages around. And these guys, they're kind of desperate to get back on the map. In fact, the Bank of Tampa was going to implode and go back to Jacksonville before Mr. Ybor arrived. When he gets there, he sits down with the Board of Trade of Tampa, which are like the, kind of the city council, yeah. They negotiate some concessions. He buys some swamp and immediately writes to everybody he's ever met, But here's the thing. When he writes to all these guys in the cigar industry to come this way, he tells these board of trade, I'm going to bring people to your little sleepy town of Tampa under one condition. I want my own city. I want my own mayor. I want my own police force. I want my own rules. In fact, that's the reason why Ybor City went so wild with, well, organized crime. Because Mr. Ybor had his own mayor, his own police force, like 6 guys, you know, and the Tampa police, yeah, pretty easy to get 6 guys on your payroll. And they also had a port and a railroad connected to it. When the organized crime organizations found out about that, it went in crazy mode to immediately get as many people down here as possible to see who could take over. Well, Ybor City, being its own city, eventually became part of Hillsborough County, Tampa, Florida, because, well, like I said, that cigar industry came this way, and it was successful. When you're making money, eventually people are like, yeah, we want you all on board. So it went from being its own city, much to Mr. Ybor's chagrin, to part of Tampa, Florida. So now it's a neighborhood of Tampa, Florida, but it's notorious.
Yeah.
And that's why our tours have such an attraction, because people, they'll drive through Ybor City and go, what is this place? Why is it so different than, you know, half a mile that way? Because it was its own municipality, or, you know the word I'm looking for. It was its own city.
Right. I was going to say, it's funny because whenever somebody ever asks me about Ybor, I'm always like, you know, it's a lot like Bourbon Street. Like we have 7th Avenue, which is a lot like Bourbon Street. But the difference is the buildings are so much nicer in Ybor.
Yeah.
You go to Bourbon Street, and it's not that nice, and it's sinking, and the buildings aren't holding up well. Like Ybor has the same style buildings, but they're bigger, they're in better condition, they're taller, they have the same. They have the banisters. Yeah, you can look over, and we have Guavaween. We've got
Mardi Gras that we do down there. Gasparilla. Everything that you can think of. Pride Parade, whatever you think of, they have an excuse to throw beads and have some drinks.
Right.
The reason why, in my opinion, it probably looks that way is because, first of all, it's a little newer than New Orleans, you know, but also it's a National Historic Landmark District, which there's only 3 of those in the entire state of Florida. To get that designation, you have to have a major impact on American history, and that's why I also do a little history on my tours as well, because it kind of sprinkles in with the ghosts. But the National Historic Designation means that it gets funding from the government to make sure those old buildings stay exactly as they were.
Right.
So these buildings, which have been around for 110, 120 years, they look like they were built yesterday, but in the old school look of, you know, like they don't make them like they used to.
They're great. Yeah, there's a bunch of cigar factories.
Oh, it's amazing.
Shops and warehouses, and there's still working
factories. Yeah, a couple.
Right. I was gonna say Gasparilla. You know, so Jose Gaspar, right?
Yeah.
The pirate Jose Gaspar. You understand? Up until probably, I want to say, you know, probably till I was in my 30s, I thought he was a real person.
Me too.
I always thought he was a real person. Like they had this whole background and history about this pirate and how he became a pirate, and he was once like a sailor, and then this happened, and he eventually took over all of Tampa. All bullshit. And I totally bought it. Like I believed all that.
Well, you're from Tampa?
Yes.
It was the boogeyman. You know, my mom would tell me, you got to eat your vegetables or Jose Gaspar is going to bust down the door and kill us all. It was, you know, it was like the Tampa boogeyman. But Jose Gaspar, even though it's a mythical pirate, it's still a great excuse to start drinking rum at 9 in the morning.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we were going to talk about basically the like the history of kind of the mob in the general mob in Ybor and how they eventually came down, and like, you know, like I mentioned to you earlier, like I grew up down the street from the Traficantes.
Yeah, Traficantes.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
Am I saying that wrong?
Traficante. Yeah.
Traficante.
Oh yeah.
Come on,
it's okay, but it's okay.
You know, backwoods. So.
Well, I'll tell you. You know, the guy that I get most of my information from, he actually is the guy who wrote a book on Santo Traficante. He wrote the Cigar City Mafia book. His name is Scott, and I always mess up his last name, Dietry or Deitch. Either way, he's like the encyclopedia of mafia history, and I've sat down with him for cigars and drinks, and not only that, I've read all of his books. He really can tell you Ybor City was probably the best kept secret in mafia history. I mean, first of all, remember I told you Mr. Ybor sat down with the Board of Trade and all that? Well, the Board of Trade of Tampa, as prestigious as that sounds, was nothing but like, you know, alligator farmers and fishermen. Like, they really had no idea what they were doing. And when this fancy Spaniard sits down with them and starts talking business, they're going, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's like, these guys don't even have a business bone in their body.
Right.
So like a good businessman, he started playing hard to get.
Yeah.
He started saying stuff like, well, you know, money really isn't an issue. I can buy a lot of things. And, you know, I've been to a lot of towns that I've seen, and Really, the problem in Tampa is you guys are prudes. You think gambling should be illegal. It was illegal in Tampa, Florida then. You think alcohol should be illegal, which long before nationwide prohibition, no alcohol out in Tampa. It was a very Christian area. In fact, I think, you can't buy alcohol till on Sunday, till 11 a.m. or something like that? Yeah. Yeah, that used to be 4 p.m. They only changed it for the Buccaneers games. But anyways, he thought, if I bring a bunch of Cubans to this area to roll cigars, I know them. They're going to want to drink. Yeah. They're going to want to gamble. They're going to want to sing and dance all night. This isn't going to work out. So the Board of Trade, they said, well, Mr. Ybor, why don't we just turn our backs to that swamp of yours and you can just have your fun out there? And he said, I'll need that in writing right now.
Right.
So that day they added a new page to the Tampa Town Charter called Mr. Ybor's Provisions.
Nice, right?
In these provisions, gambling was legal in Ybor City only. Alcohol, Ybor City only. But this was also in the provisions. Remember I told you that they had their own police force?
Yeah.
No Tampa police official could arrest anybody in Ybor City, no matter the crime.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you're interested in getting a painting done by me, my contact information is in the description box. Enjoy the video.
So when the mafia found out about that.
Well, I was going to say, absolute power.
Yeah,
corrupts.
With a port and a railroad, that sweet Caribbean rum was flowing through here like the Hillsborough River. I mean, any big name you can think of, from Al Capone and Meyer Lansky, the biggest one, Santo Trafficante Jr., he and his dad pretty much ruled Ybor City from the 50s all the way through the 80s. But I could tell you about some other characters. Like, there's a guy that is known as the White Shadow. You ever heard of a name named Charlie Wall? You ever heard that name before?
That sounds familiar.
Charlie Wall, if you have a chance to Google and look him up, he was the kingpin of Ybor City. Not just Ybor, but Tampa. And he actually was not like your traditional mafioso like on The Godfather. Or, he wasn't a nothing to something guy.
I'm probably wrong. It makes me think of the Dixie Mafia, but that's probably
no. Charlie was he was a local here in Tampa. He also, his dad was part of the Board of Trade. He came up very rich, but he got into some shaky situations. Well, some tragedies happened in his family. His mother died, things like that, and he eventually got involved in a game called Bolita. Which, have you ever heard of the game Bolita? Well, good. Bolita, Spanish for little ball, was the biggest gambling game in Tampa, Florida. It was like a lotto game, but more of a social event because there was a bunch of them on every block. And Charlie happened to be involved in this, but eventually he rose to become the king of Bolita. He literally took over.
Like the lottery or something? Or
yeah, let me explain. It's actually pretty funny. Like I said, they had one on every single block. Bolita operations all around the town. And what you do is you go in there, you pay for your number and all that, and then after that they bring you into the room where you can drink and gamble and have a good time. Mostly it was like a social event. But when they were ready to start the Bolita game, little ball, they lock the front door so nobody else can get in. And then they bring everybody into a side room known as the staging room, where pretty much there's a big stage, a table on the stage, a big bag, and then a bunch of little tiny balls with numbers all on the table. When they're ready to start the game, they pour all the balls into the bag, they tie it up, and the Bolita operator throws it into the crowd. And the crowd, catches the bag, and they're juggling around and throwing it around and shaking it and cheering. And I mean, you've had like 3 or 4 cocktails at this point. It's a great time. Eventually, they throw the bag on stage. The Bolita operator catches the bag, opens it up, starts reaching in. The last ball picked out is the winner of everybody's money. So it is kind of like the lottery.
Yeah.
But in the lottery, if nobody wins, what happens?
Rolls over.
Not in Bolita. If nobody wins, house wins.
House keeps it.
Better luck next time.
I was going to say, you throw that bag in the crowd, I'm going to throw you a bag back that doesn't have a ball in it, you know? I mean,
or, well, you want your ball to be picked, of course. So you had to be very careful about if you did cheat in this game. Like I said, every single block had a Bolita operation. If they were like, this guy cheats, don't go here. But Charlie had a pretty good idea, Charlie Wall. One day he looked at his wall with all the numbers on it and said, well, nobody's picked number 2. So he goes to the staging area by himself, takes the number 2 ball and puts it on a block of ice. When the game's ready to start, he puts it back with the other balls. When that Bolita operator catches the bag and reaches in and feels the cold ball, that'll be the last one picked. Number 2. Oh, no one's got it. And then he closes it to create some heat, puts it back down, and everybody comes and inspects the balls, make sure they're not weighed or anything. Charlie got away with it for years. Made a ton of money.
It's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Hey, well, you hear these organized crime stories, and Scott, by the way, that guy, he does a whole mafia tour. If you do want to do it, I mean, he's the guy to talk to about all that kind of stuff.
Oh, does he do it? Does he do it with your tour?
No, whole different company, and it's real recognized real. He's a great tour guide, and well, he lets me do all the history and the ghosts, and he covers most of that stuff. But like I said, you can't talk history and ghosts without talking a little bit of the organized crime that happened
Right,
here,
right. It's funny because when I showed up to the cigar, the place where you had us meet,
Yeah.
like everybody knew you there. Like
Yeah.
all the guys were like, we walk up, we're on the sidewalk, and we're standing there. And we hadn't been there 10 seconds. Walked up, stopped, kind of looked around, and one of the guys goes, "Are you here for the tour?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, you're looking for a guy. He's gonna have what do they call the hat?
Panamanian hat.
Yeah, he's got a Panamanian hat."
Yeah.
He said he said he was here a minute ago. Like he may be inside. And another guy was like, "Yeah, no, he's inside." And I was like everybody sitting in front of it was a coffee shop and a cigar place. And there must have been 15 guys there. All of them were like, "Yeah, he just went in." So it's like.
Well, when you have a tour that was named by U.S. Traveler Magazine Best Ghost Tour in America, people start to recognize you.
What a segue.
People do start to recognize you around town.
So, okay, so what else is the you were saying, you were talking about before I interrupted you?
No, you're fine. No.
You were saying about the mob, and then you were talking about you told all the different stories about when we would go into the buildings.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not just mafia stories. There's it was like Ybor City was like the Wild West of the South.
Love, some of them were like love stories.
Yeah, there was some heartbreak there and stuff. I mean, well, like I said, the Wild West of the South. There was dueling in Ybor City. There would be public executions in Ybor City. I could go on for about 5 hours on my ghost story about hauntings, but I have to keep it within 2 hours because I just
right.
I feel like that's the attention span these days.
Dueling.
Yeah, there were duels in Ybor City.
Yeah, I know duel. I mean,
oh
I get
yeah,
it, but geez, that's
10 steps in turn. In fact, it's more of a history thing than anything else. But there was a duel based upon what they were going to have read to them at the factories, because they used to have readers at the factories.
It's funny you say that, because when we were going through, I actually was telling Jess. I said, it's funny. I said they used to have these guys that they would read the newspaper.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they would read a chapter of a book or 2 chapters throughout because these guys, they didn't have radios. They didn't have.
And most of them were illiterate, the immigrants that came here. So literally,
that's how they got their news.
And you're rolling hundreds of cigars, and all of a sudden, you're hearing like the Count de Monte Cristo, and you're like, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I just wrote 100 cigars through that chapter. You get interested, and
pretty cool.
Keeps you going.
That was the YouTube. That was
YouTube back in the day.
That
exactly.
was YouTube.
That was and even the days before TV, radio, before any of this stuff, there was guys that would literally be paid to sit there, and I mean, there was no microphone either. They had to yell it across the whole thing as they're reading Don Quixote or something. So there was a duel because one of the factories couldn't decide what was going to be read.
You know what that is? That's an argument in the TV. So nobody can see right now, but Boziak's sitting over there. That was like an argument in the TV room over what we're going to watch tomorrow night. That's the argument. There's going to be, we'll fight.
Who's holding the remote?
Who's holding the remote? Exactly. I'm like, funny you know that. Exactly. Go put my boots on. We're going to meet.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah, it was intense. What can I say?
Yeah, that we'd go in the showers and fight.
Well, that's a different world, man. It fascinates me. I mean, to hear your story, too, is just like, it's fascinating to think about, because somebody from the outside, obviously, the most I've gotten was a night, in the slammer.
So, and it's horrible.
Nothing compared to what I'm sure you went through. I mean, they gave me a cheese sandwich. I went home. That was it. But for you guys,
it's so funny because whenever we talk about it, he always gripes about it. He's like, oh, fucking bologna sandwiches. I like bologna sandwiches. Like, I'm okay with the bologna sandwich.
I eat the sandwich.
So what happened with the duel? Is there a specific story?
Well, so the Lectors, let's talk a little bit about them. They were, like I said, the cream of the society. They were like Hollywood superstars. And they were also at the mercy of the factory workers because they were paid only by tips. They didn't get a living wage, but they also made the most money in everybody in the factory other than the owner, because everybody was like, great story. Here's 2 cents. Here's 3 cents. They would eventually they'd be like, I made $3 today, and my house costs $1.50 a week.
Right.
They were really well off. So these Lectors were totally at the mercy of these, workers. And, well, the 1920s, let's backtrack even more then. 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in Russia. Mm-hmm. Communism was being spread around the world. So in the early 1920s, these Lectors kept getting demands like, read from that Karl Marx guy again. I want to hear about workers' rights. And the Lector's like, listen, the owner told me not to read that stuff.
Yeah.
If you can imagine being the owner, you're going like, what is he saying down there? I don't want to hear that kind of stuff. Big business. And no. Well, eventually it got to be so ugly that half the factory were torn. And there's a whole placard over there by Hotel Haya about this. They literally had a duel to decide what would happen. Well, Karl Marx won. And then eventually that was the death of the Lector, because the factory owner started going like, We should get some radio.
I'll invest in the radio.
Yeah, we should get some speakers and stuff. You know, yeah, that's the way it went. Karl Marx killed the lector. What can I say?
Yeah. Well, you know, you have to imagine too. Like I thought, you know, it's funny because being from Tampa, like these factories are like, you know, they're massive factories,
and they're still here.
They're big warehouses. So you have the roofs are held up by, you know, the thick pole, the beams,
the iron and stuff.
Right. So you've got hundreds of guys sitting at tables rolling cigars. And so on one of those poles up in the air, sometimes this is what, or they'd have build like a stand. They'd have a guy in the middle of it, and he's the lector, right?
Yeah, he'd just be sitting in a big chair up there.
I don't think we explained that. So there's hundreds of people in a huge room.
Men, women, children, 10 years old. You start working in the factory, and they're sitting there reading the newspaper to him every morning. As soon as he got there, he'd have his coffee, just like you. He'd have the newspaper and go, "All right, today's events. This is the date, and et cetera, et cetera." Then he'd go right into the chapters. But not only that, the lectors would also keep him coming back to work because they get to the good part of the book and go, "All right, make sure you're all here tomorrow."
Yeah.
And then you'll hear the end of Romeo and Juliet or whatever I've been reading. You know, it's, you know, it was almost like, stay tuned, folks. You know,
yeah.
Genius.
What's so funny is it's like the level of what you had to do to entertain someone before. Like, you know, you're imagining like, oh, we're gonna play kick the can. Like you told some kids that, then now they'd be like, what? Well, no, that's because they have YouTube. They have, you know, they have games. They have, what was that Oculus thing?
Oh yeah, the Oculus.
Oh my,
I've played
ridiculous,
it.
bro.
It's fun. Well, you know, I used to when I tease kids that come on my tour, I go, you know what the #1 toy was for kids back in the day? A kite. Just a piece of paper and a twig and a string, and you try and, you know, kite cutting. You try and hit your friend's kite. Simpler times, man.
Hey, sorry for interrupting the video, but want to let you guys know that if you join my Patreon at the top tier, every single month you get a different painting, and the contact information for my Patreon page is in the description. Back to the video.
What can I say? I have a son. He wants PlayStation 5. I'm like, these tours ain't doing that good, buddy.
Okay, so what else is cooking? How long have you been doing the tours?
I've been doing the tours about 7 years. You know, it's like I said, voted top tour in America by U.S. Traveler Magazine. TripAdvisor has given us an award of one of the top tours to see in the world, and it's a must-see if you ever come to Tampa, Florida, or if you're traveling around Florida at all in general. You know, come to Ybor City. Just even if you have to drive through it. If you haven't seen Ybor City, like you said,
it's pretty cool.
It's a different place. It's got this own, you know, je ne sais quoi, as they say. You know, like you don't know why, but when you go through it, you're like attracted to it. I've had people that come to Ybor City, they talk to me and they go, I have no idea why I'm here. It's just I heard about it and I had to go see it. And now they live there.
Well, you can walk all around Ybor and the houses, and there's, you know, the worst part is trying to park.
Really,
but they do. They have a bunch of parking garages and everything else now.
Yeah.
Well, and they have brick. Like all the streets are brick. They have a trolley system.
Yep.
They have
can take you all the way downtown.
It's honestly, it's way cooler than. It's way more family. I hate to say family friendly. It's more. It's better put together and it's better maintained than
it was.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying than Bourbon Street.
Oh yeah.
in New Orleans. I mean, it's way better. It just everything about, like, you don't have to. We brought Jess's daughter down the other day. Like, I wasn't worried about anybody coming up to her and saying something, you know, raunchy or rude or anything.
It's still a party town.
Yeah, but it wasn't. But it ain't bad.
Like,
and it's just on a more solid foundation. It's just better built. Everything's kept up better.
You can thank the city of Tampa for that. I mean, they do a pretty good job, and especially recently. I mean, even before COVID, I went to like Gasparilla and stuff like that. I'm like, this was pretty well maintained. You know, considering how many people come down here for these parades and stuff. But I mean, other than that, like, there's still some issues. It's a party town. The bars are open till 2, 3 in the morning.
It's
just
like
on the wrong alley, you're gonna have something. You know, there's still gonna be some things that pop up in the news that people go like, Ybor City, I'm not going there. It's safer than any town that you just mentioned, like Bourbon Street, New Orleans, Nashville, Memphis. I mean, these are places that have a lot more crime rate than Ybor City does.
Yeah.
So the reputation of the 80s, 90s, you know, I remember growing up around that town. If the streetlights came on, you got out of there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It was rough. Yeah.
You know what we used to do? I went to, Davis Island.
Yeah.
So I went to a school on Davis Island for kids with learning disabilities.
Oh, okay.
So we would, during lunch, we would jump in our car, drive all the way down to Ybor. Get is it Silver Ring or Gold Ring? There was an old Cuban sandwich shop.
That one you might stump me on.
Really?
Silver Ring or Gold Ring? I'm not sure, but
so we would go there.
For me to look up when I get home.
We get a bunch of Cuban sandwiches, and we drive we could just make it all the way there and all the way back because of traffic. It was but
it was worth it for the sandwich.
Yeah, go there and you get a Cuban sandwich, and they were amazing. And but yeah, it was rough. Like that was in the middle of the day, and it wasn't great.
Yeah.
At night, it was horrible.
Yeah. At nighttime, I remember, like I said, as a kid, if my mom found out I was in Ybor City, she'd be real upset.
Plus, where I bought like one of the major. I had one scam where I got like $11.5 million. It was from buying houses, and the bulk of those houses were in Ybor City.
Yeah.
So you could buy houses back then for. Same houses that are now going for $100,000, right? Yeah. Well, I was buying them in rehab condition, like $40,000-$50,000.
Yeah,
those same houses in shitty condition are still going for $200,000 now.
That's what's
and
crazy.
They're horrible.
Exactly, and surrounded by okay area, but not the best area. But speaking on that, like Ybor City's always had something like that going on, and the scam that you even mentioned about getting a house, working around the mortgage fraud or whatever you were really, really deep into. Basically, that's been going on since the beginning of time in Ybor. The first crimes of the mafia were arson and grand larceny. They, they'd get a bunch of furniture and have it appraised for $100,000, even though it's worth like $50. Light a match, and then now they collect. The insurance companies. It's nothing new. It's something in Ybor City. I'm sure. I mean, I don't want to step on any toes, but there's probably something going on now that I don't know about. Yeah. It's always going to be a cycle of something going on in Ybor City. It's had so many different lives. How could it not?
Listen, I've always done well on a fire. I've had a couple fires. Every one of them was a good deal. It always worked out in the end for me.
Yeah, I hear you. It's insurance. What can I say?
I'm telling you. Actually, I had a fire one time. I literally bought. I'm just gonna tell you.
Yeah,
I bought a place we bought it on like a Monday. And we were in the middle. The people that owned it were in the middle of evicting someone. They were going to have them evicted by like Wednesday. And so they were like, do you want to wait until Wednesday when we get this guy out? And I said, nah, we'll close Monday. Just follow through on the eviction. And it doesn't matter because he won't know that we've bought it on Monday. So he doesn't know that really technically.
He's not going to get a nail on the door that says.
Right. Well, technically, we're supposed to start over.
Yeah.
The eviction. So I said, just continue to evict him. The cops will show up. Nobody will know.
I see.
No big deal.
Okay,
we close on a Monday. Wednesday, I get a phone call from the real estate agent. And she says, hey, are you down there? And I go, down where? She goes, at the property. It was a quadplex. It was a 4-unit building. And I went, no. Well, why? She goes, oh, they didn't call you? And I went, no, what happened? They had evicted the guy. The cop showed up. He walked out. The cop was like, you got to get out now. And we're changing the locks. You got to get out. So he left. They didn't change the lock.
Oh, he came back.
Because he walked straight out, got into his car, drove down the street, came back with a gas can an hour later. Literally, there's some old woman in a wheelchair and duplex next door who looks out the window all day, sees him pull up, get out with a gas can, walk over to the door, put his key in, opens the door, takes gas, comes out, drops the gas can, gets in his car, and she said right then I could see the smoke coming out, drives off, cops show up, she calls the fire department, she calls the police, police say, did you see this? Yeah, it's the guy they just evicted an hour ago.
Hey.
Tells them the whole thing, and the whole place burned down. So she's like, it didn't all burn down. The one unit got really badly burned.
Yeah.
And I remember she called me. I was like, oh, my God. So I drove down there, and I was like, I had just, luckily, obviously I had insurance.
Yeah.
But think about that policy. They just had insured it for 2 days.
Yeah, no. If I was that, even though, insurance claims, they're supposed to be pretty skeptical, I'd be like, no, get this guy in my office right now. But how did it work out for you?
Oh, it worked out. Well, first the claims adjuster came down. He said like 30, he wanted to give us like $32,000. And I was thrilled.
Yeah.
But
just knock that room off and build a wall there.
Well, it was a building, and I was thinking, honestly, I had only bought that building because the school board was supposed to be buying up everything in the area to put a new school in. It had been planned for years.
So you were trying to flip it.
Well, I was planning. I was thinking they would buy it from me. I was just going to maintain it until they bought it.
Yeah.
So anyway, they offered like $32,000 or something like that. I got a public adjuster. He came in. He looked at it. He came back argued with the adjuster, got it up to $59,000, which he gets 10% of.
Yeah.
He took 10%, so I got a check for like $54,000 and change.
I'll take it.
I took $1,500, got somebody to gut the whole place, and
Yeah.
before we started to build it out, we got the letter from the school board saying,
to
"Hey,
buy
we're
it."
going to buy it." I bought the property for like
Jesus.
$80,000. They bought it from me for $157,000 or $158,000
Nice.
within a few months. Like that was a nice.
And then plus the check you got.
Plus the check. I only spent like $1,500. Now, I did lose the rent for like
Yeah.
3 months on that one building out of 4 buildings, though.
Yeah.
So big deal. I never had to make a payment.
Yeah.
So that was, like I said, I did well on that fire. I've always done well on a fire.
Yeah, I could just pick. You ever seen that meme where the girl's like smiling in front of the fire, the burning building? Like that, I bet that was your face when you saw it. Like,
Oh,
look at that money go.
nice. It was
Nice.
good. Yeah. It was,
Yeah,
it was a
hey.
good lick. That was a good lick.
It's pretty funny the way it works.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Well-
Anything else you want to?
Well, just I'll want to make sure that people know we do tours 7 nights a week, available 8 p.m. If they fill up, we go to 10 p.m. It's $25 a person for adults, $10 for children, and then it's about a 90-minute tour. We do historical facts. We go into some haunted buildings, and let me tell you, the best way to put it, it's like being in a scary movie, but you're in the movie.
Yeah.
You get to go in the buildings, and
Well,
you know this,
that's what
Matthew.
was cool.
Matt,
was
you
actually
got to go in.
It was at what was it? 10 o'clock at night. 10:30
Yeah,
at
about
night.
we get there about like 9:30 when the
Right.
sun has set. It's even better when like you get a full
dark.
moon and it's dark. And when you get off 7th Avenue of Ybor, you know it gets quiet.
Yeah.
Real
Well,
quiet.
and then what was the one building? Was it the old Cuban Club?
Yeah, the Cuban Club of Ybor
Like
City.
that's a massive building. We walked through the whole and it was just us. There's nobody there. You have the
I have the
key.
key to it. Luckily, because the respect I have for the building, but not only that, this is a building that like the shows like the Ghost Hunters, Dead Files, Ghost Adventures, they have all investigated this building, and the Ghost Hunter said there's hundreds of ghosts in it. It was named one of the top most haunted buildings in America, and I get to bring you guys in there to investigate it.
Yeah.
Talk about, there's a reason why we're getting such highly acclaimed, praise for our tour, because when you have passion, when you have knowledge, and when you have access, it's head and shoulders above the others.
Well, we'll leave the link to the website in the
Please.
description. And so, all right. Well, I appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, do me a favor and subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this. Share the video. Leave a comment for me in the description. I try and respond in the description. Leave a comment in the comments section. I try and respond to any comments worth responding to. And I appreciate you guys watching, and see ya.